Okay, well, for the last talk of the day, we're going to have a topic which is actually near and dear to my heart, something I've always believed is extremely important, the concept of dog fooding. And James Foster from Gemtalk, which I have to remind myself to say those words instead of Gemstone, but or VMware, or Brocat, or be that as it may. I like this idea. Dog fooding is something that I think everybody who's using tools, who's trying to sell tools should do, because if you don't use your own tools, you don't know what their strengths and, more importantly, what their weaknesses are. So.
Okay, thank you. I do remember for several years listening to James describe building his RSS feed bottom feeder and the lessons learned from that, and the things he was able to go back and tell people. So, dog fooding has been suggested from Wikipedia. Eating your own dog food is a slang term used to reference a scenario in which usually a software company uses its own product to demonstrate quality, capability of the product. The idea is if the company expects customers to buy its products, it should also be willing to use those products. And this seems like it should be fairly obvious. What was interesting in just even raising this question for what we're looking at is our bug system. And the suggestion that we could use the latest version of our software on an application that we actually use. And there was even hints of internal resistance in this but the bug system is important. And there was, the idea that, well, if there are problems, maybe we should find them before the customers do.
I think that's the point.
So that complaint didn't carry much weight. So what we built, some of the experiences we had in that. Now, this was not our first foray into dog fooding. In fact, the old bug system that we had before, or have had, is based partly on Gemstone. And the difference, though, is that it was never updated. The old system used email, it used shell scripts, it used C programs, it used text files, it used cron jobs. There was some of the data that was in Gemstone, and there was a web front end that had been tacked on sometime later. Just one small part of it was the new bug entry, as you were putting in a new bug. As I mentioned, it used email. In fact, email was actually intended to be the foundation of the system, so that you could submit bugs through email, you would report them fixed through email, and everything would happen there. So to report a new bug, you would send an email, and later on there was added the capability of a command line interface that would send the email for you, and then eventually a web front end that would send the email for you. So if you wanted to create a new bug, the email would get dropped into a mbox format for a user that was created that would sit in this Unix directory. A Unix cron job would go find new email. It would then lock a text file, read the text file, get a number out of the text file, increment it, write the number back out to the text file, and unlock the text file. Then create a new bug with that number. And then send an email to the team that we had a new bug number. So what if the email server, not just what if the database goes down, what if the email server or the cron job? So every 6 months, we would, or 3 months, every few months, we'd have this problem of, oh, well, you know, I submitted a bug, but I haven't heard back from the database for a while because, you know, you wouldn't get an instant response. It would wait for this cron job and so on. So you periodically you just say, you know, it's been a few hours and I haven't seen any bug mail for a while. You know, do you think there's just nothing's happened? And someone else would say, well, I submitted a bug, but so then someone would start tracking things down, and we'd find, well, so this is an email that I had in my records. The bug system had a mail glitch yesterday. We think it's fixed, but I don't see any in progress or failed emails. So if you've submitted anything to the system in a while and haven't seen anything come through, then it's probably lost. So you have to submit it over again. And then the comment from whoever was solving this problem saying, you know, we really should do something about this. So yes, we should. Many brittle, obsolete technologies. As I say, it actually is based in Gemstone, or the old system, had actually been upgraded to 6.1 of the 32-bit product, 5 years ago. So we were on the 10-year-old technology only 5 years ago.
We can help you do a 64-bit Gemstone upgrade if you wish.
So the question is, you know, doing a 64-bit upgrade is you know, we've helped a few of our customers through that, and a few of our customers have done that. There were pieces in this. You may recall that in the pre-Seaside era, most of the Smalltalk vendors had their foray into the web. And there were different technologies that different vendors had that said, oh, we can put a web front end on this for you. And different capabilities. Gemstone had something called GB Web that was Gemstone's attempt at this. And at that time, Gemstone was not making source code available for some of its more proprietary products. And so GB Web actually was installed into a database without the source code. And you would make calls into it and do things. This has long since been retired, long since obsolete, and in fact, the source code seems to have not been kept under configuration control and updated very much. And so one of the first challenges, if you were even going to try to upgrade this to 64-bit and keep the old thing, was the just finding, installing, seeing how this worked. The database itself was actually pretty stable if you left it alone. But the challenges turned out to be, as we saw here, the mail system, the cron jobs, and everything else. So certainly there's a recognition that if you want to have a decent system, you know, if we're going to use this tool, it'd be nice to have it updated. So Seaside, you know, was a fairly obvious thing. A few of us who were playing with Seaside at the time looked at this and said, well, this would be, you know, an obvious choice for that. And so started wading into it, but it turns out that there were a few other things that just made this not so much trouble with Seaside, but it turns out it's a non-trivial project, not something that you're going to do in 3 weeks or just a little bit of time. And so other things usually ended up taking priority. So part of it is the GB Web stuff and 64-bit and some of the other artifacts that were in the system. There's 20 years of data in it, and again, that shouldn't be too complicated, but it turns out the same database had been used for a variety of other projects over the years. And so the actual, even 20 years of bug tracking data was only a small part of this database. And there were actually 2 copies of the bug tracking system, old copies of the help request system for support, and various other bizarre things. And one of our person's comments, Lisa said, you know, moving off of old Smalltalk systems to new technology is challenging. And that's part of the reason that people are still using Smalltalk. So, you know, as I say, we only really had problems with the old system every few months. You know, 3, 6 months, you know, things would go down. People would say, I haven't seen any email for a while, what's going on? And, you know, then the mumblings of, we really should do something about this. And so finally, I put down on my goals, Norm approved, writing a replacement for the bug system. And so that, of course, was just, you know, the easy part was putting it down and getting approval. The next thing, and although James mentions that it's a good thing for technology companies to do the dog fooding, it turns out that one of the challenges in working with a large team, and all, you know, a dozen people is a comparatively large team, and at least on the Smalltalk projects, it used to be Tim and Keith and I and Fargo and the 3 of us, and so that was my sort of small team experience. But when you have a dozen Smalltalk developers who have an average of almost 20 years of Smalltalk programming each, it turns out that, and you are working on something that is used by each of the developers every day, you end up with some strongly held opinions. Developers have opinions about how their tools work, and a number of us have experience, successful experience, at telling other people how they should run their projects and what architecture they should use and what technologies they should use. And so when you're presented with such an obvious problem and such an obvious opportunity for improvement, the whole question of what technologies to use, what to replace, what path to take, what features to add, and how should the project be managed, and consensus is certainly desirable, particularly among, you know, people who are working together, but it can also take more time to do that. So, first question, just which technologies to use. I think if we were anything other than, you know, a technology company, then the obvious answer is there are bug tracking systems out there. You should not need to build your own bug tracking system. And that's still a fair statement, and there were people on the team who said, you know, we don't need to spend months building a bug tracking system. There ought to be one out there, and yet, you know, the answers you would expect of, but will it do exactly what I need? Will it provide these reports? Will it let me keep track of this aspect of things? And, you know, these are all the issues that any end user organization would have in selecting any software, but of course, we have the advantage of we're all developers, and so we really would like to do it. And make it, and you can see how living with something that someone else built is just not as much fun as having your own. So then, of course, the dog fooding aspects of one of the things that actually was sort of pushing this up a notch wasn't just that, every few months we'd have to restart the mail server, but we have a new feature that is out there and is pretty important, of the hot standby. And people started saying, yes, we can run tests, and we do have, huge numbers of tests on all the things that we do, but if we were actually running a production Gemstone system with a standby that was in production up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that if things actually had problems that failed over, wouldn't that be remarkable if we actually were trying this out? So we don't have that aspect of it actually in use yet, but we are moving toward that. We are on a system that actually has the features that we could use. Another thing, and I will show a little bit, I've talked about before, we had a web server framework from Web Tools that gave some opportunities to move in this direction. So what should we try to do? And one obvious is just the old version of Gemstone S, the 32-bit. That certainly is out of date. It'd be nice to upgrade that. The GB Web is obsolete, and so it'd be nice to do that. You would think that, this is something you could just do, or that's something you could just do. But it turns out that whenever we had problems, the problems we had were with this email interface and these cron jobs and scripts, and just the fact that the last used bug number is stored in a text file on a Unix system that you lock with a script and edit, and something like a unique ID just is something that ought to be in a database. So the email interface was actually the most brittle, and it's kind of, we did reach the conclusion that, these other changes would actually be side effects of fixing that. So the next thing is, so do you try to keep the system as much as possible the same, just carry the code, only change the things you need to? Do you do a port, replace as little as possible, but just get this problem solved? Or is this the time to do a rewrite? And again, the engineering temptation is, I want to do a new system, I want to rewrite it, all those problems, I want to just walk away from them. But of course, the advice we would give, and you recognize, is that's, maybe a little bit more ambitious than it needs to be, and maybe you should try to narrow the scope of things. But as I mentioned, the database that was there just had a lot of cruft in it. And it was just hard to deal with it. The schema was, I guess, mangled, would be a generous way of saying it. A lot of the data was actually just unstructured data from emails. And so over the couple decades, there's been quite a bit in the way of changes in email formatting. And so is the signature line look like this? And how do we get the name of the sender, the name of the receiver, the title? There were instvar names that had been repurposed for other things. And so there's the bug note is one concept we have. There's also release note, but the release note uses the bug note field, and just challenges there. There were also some number of design decisions that reuse by subclassing is something that was probably more popular 20, 25 years ago than it is in the last decade or so. You know, how often would you today choose to design something by subclassing array or a collection? Generally, you build a wrapper and delegate to the collection rather than subclassing collection. And so, and there's then a certain amount of lack of clarity as to what can be removed. And so one attraction of a rewrite is if you start with entirely new classes, then whatever, if it works, then the methods that you have there are sufficient. And if it doesn't work, then you need to add some more methods. But it's harder to know what you can remove than figuring out what you can add. Now, of course, after many years of pent-up demand, there's a great deal of interest in, well, now that we're doing this, we can do it right, we can add this feature. On the other hand, that gives you quite a bit in the way of scope creep, risk, and the danger of endless polishing, and distractions. On the other hand, there may be some people for whom, you know, a little bit of political buy-in, you know, if you can get so-and-so to be enthusiastic for, no, I want the new system because it improves this, you know, rather than just it's a cutover. Tim?
So did you have to consult with the entire team on, like, were they the domain model experts on everything that had to be in there, or was this something where you kind of had a limited group to know how to define the new system? Or
there were some team meetings where this was discussed, and then there'd be other times when I would send an invitation to everybody on the team and then see who showed up. And there were some people who, many people who quickly recognized that these meetings are a little bit tedious and strong opinions being expressed. And so there were some people who just decided they would just come to me directly and say, I'd really like this, you know, and just please do that. And there were others who, and while we all use the bug system, there are some roles that use it more intently than others and who use certain sets of features more intently than others. And also there are some who, while it hasn't had much maintenance, there are some who the little maintenance it had fell to them. And so they're interested in making sure that it's maintainable if they have to be involved in it. And so there's a degree to which, you know, any new features are going to increase the scope, but maybe make it, to the extent that there's no hard deadline for we need to install this, and the old system isn't really completely, you know, it's been something we've been living with for years. So, you know, should we go live on the new system this week? You know, well, not this week, we've got such and such happening. And so building some support for the new system was a little bit of it. Now, one of the controversy, you know, so how much should we do of this? How much should we do of that? Another area that was controversial and started out as kind of a, you know, all-team vote issue, but you know, finally sort of percolated down to those who were being strongest in the opinion, eventually carried the day there. But I would be interested in your experience as well. The traditional way of installing new systems, even replacement systems, is an all-at-once cutover. You shut down the old system, you copy the data, you start up the new system, and you're just on the new system. An alternative to that was investigated and discussed is, what if you could gradually transition to the new system? What is there that the new system could provide? And so one of the things that we were able to do is write something that would scan the old system, transfer the data to the new system in near real time. So every 5 minutes, just check and see what changes there are and copy them across. And that, of course, is a little bit more work. It's a little bit more complicated. But what it gives you is a more safe, gradual transition. So we actually had the new system up and running for many weeks ahead of time, ahead of the shutting down the old one, with read-only. And actually more than read-only, you could create new bugs, but they'd have a different numbering scheme than the old one. And so we could use a new system. We could be using the new system for certain things. And now it turns out we ended up reverting to the all at once at the end, where we did actually delete the new system, shut down the old, copy all the data across once, and then start the new system. But I would be interested in comments and experience on that.
Parallel.
What?
Parallel.
Parallel, yes, yes.
Same inputs go both places, both systems produce supposedly the same output?
Right.
Yeah.
That is a little bit more work as compared to the perfect scenario. But it's likely to be less work than the imperfect scenario of the new system, hasn't been fully tested. So let's take just a brief look at it. And what I'm going to do is I have a Gemstone tool on the Mac that allows me to select and start a database. And so it is starting up the database, setting up the caching, monitoring, and the cache warmer. So this is the output that you would get if you were starting on command line things. There are logs that we can look at, so we can see the startup log for the stone. We can see other logs for the page cache monitor, the free frame AIO, reclaim gem, admin gem, LDI, and the cache warmer is running, but it's going to take a minute or two for it to fill up the cache. So we can then start up. Kermit is the name of sort of the internal name for it, and I can start a script that starts up the web server, and again it's going to that was web tools. Let's see if we can do Kermit.
There's a halt in there.
Well, actually, it's an error because the address is already in use. So it was trying to bind to a particular port. So I might try that once more and see which port it is trying to bind to. We'll stop the other one and see if maybe... this is on 8080. And that's bringing up some tools. And then let's take a look at the other script. And that should be picking up the server. And I'm going to say web server. So let's see if this Okay, well, let's go in and look at the code, which was going to be part of the demo, and maybe see if we can determine what's going on here. So we've got our web tools. We have Kermit, and we have Kermit globals. The Kermit web UI starts out with a run command. And so I think that what we need to do is edit Kermit so that it has Kermit web UI run. And so now it's running on port 8888. So I can bring that up, and we should have things cached, a few more things cached. So here is Kermit. We actually have, for a little while, have had a little bit of a Muppet theme on some internal tools. And so there's a testing tool named Bert, and then I have a testing tool named Ernie. And so when it came time for naming the bug tracking system, we were talking about frogs that eat bugs, and frogs led us to Kermit. So this is the web UI for it. I can go to a particular area. I can say I want to look at these products. Bugs assigned, Gemstone 64 bugs assigned to James that are open and not deferred. And do a search on that, and it'll come back with half a dozen of them that are currently assigned to me. We can do searches of various types and criteria, fixed, deferred, bug types, bug note required, release note required, different priorities, dates that it was submitted, dates that it was fixed, a date of a last event, free text strings, and things like that. So various searches. One of the features in it, if we look at some recent events, this will just go and pull the last 100 events in the system. And so we can see that Bob has done some maintenance on this. When you do a check-in, one of the things we're able to do is take the revision number from SVN or from store. And so if we want to go look at some code, we can say, in Kermit, on the web UI, if we are doing a fixed event, we can do a check-in. Let's see if I can give you a little bit. Oh, here we are. So we can go in and start doing some things like a perform on server, with a revision number, or we can do query an SVN log query. And so what we're able to do, this was one of the features we sort of sneaked in to get a little bit more interest in cutting over sooner. You can then, after you do a check-in in SVN, you can just type in that build number, and it will fill in the comment, the version number, the list of files that have been modified, and everything else. So this is, again, kind of an effort to simplify the workflow. We also are able to generate emails, but this is, actually a very trivial process. Send email notice. Is something that first we do a notification. We trigger a notification before doing it with the email as part of it. And if the notification returns false, then we don't send the email. Otherwise, we create a file and then just call send mail and pass in the file, and then remove the file. And we rely on send mail. So we can send notifications. Again, we're not relying on the email system, but people had gotten used to setting up their mail client and filtering and keeping up to date on things this way. So rather than doing an RSS feed or just letting people go to the web, we still send out emails, but you can configure whether you get them or not. This send email notification that can return true or false is something that's used in the testing. And so, for example, in our testing, we can say, treat it as if, do some operation that's supposed to generate an email, and then we can, and this is, maybe to make this a little bigger here down at the bottom. So this is something where we're going to do some action, and then on the notification we're going to capture the email and then say, don't bother sending it. So that way the testing, everything up to the actual calling out to Unix or Linux, everything is generating the email. And then we can actually take the email and look at it and see that it has the content we want in it. So this is, we are able to do all the testing of everything right up to testing the send mail. And, the send mail we can test separately or, rely on it working. This is the part that I'm more interested in. This gives you a little bit also of an idea of how some of the testing is done. So we've got almost 200 tests for this. We can stream a post. Actually, be able to start up just a little further in this. I guess, no. Yeah, we create the bug elsewhere. So here, we're doing a lookup for a bug number, checking to see that its status is this and that it has that. And then the testing approach is create a post of save bug and treat it as if this were the data that came in the HTTP request. So bug number this, product this, type this, version that. So this is the URL or the URL encoded thing that would come in through the post, or the get or the post. And then actually create a request out of it, let the web UI create a response, and then take a look at the response and see if it has the things in it that we expect it to have. And so there's, various tests for if I submitted to do bug fix and had this, You know, we start out with this data and we end after we get the response with things looking like that. So, again, let's take a look a little bit at the, so because one of the ways to get into the old bug system was through a command line interface. And we have people who like to use the command line interface and are not, mouse is still a little foreign to some. And it's a little bit of a teasing put down. It's not true. But VI is still very popular in the command line. And so what we wanted to be able to do was maintain the command line interface as an option. And in order to sort of have a compromise between our reporting or rewriting, we actually have a class or object called oldBug. And oldBug has all the methods that existed in the old application. And it has one instvar with target, and then whenever it wants to do something, it ends up, you know, so if it's setting the assessment, then we say target assessment is new value. So we end up working kind of indirectly through the old bug, old product. There was a class that was subclassing from a collection set or identity set, and so add is done through some of these things, like you can create a new bug and here's the things it must have, and you can send an array of events so that if you want to take this bug number and change these attributes, here are the steps you go through. So these are the things in the old bug. The new bug is something that has all the instVars and things that we want to have with a little bit of a cleaner approach. With things like, you know, create yourself as a mail message. And then previously we had mail, so since everything was done through mail, if you ever wanted to add a comment, you just sent mail and it just got added to something that you would read with MUT or something like that. Now we actually have events for fixed, reported comments and so on. So that's kind of a view into the system. And again, you know, you're not really necessarily interested in all of that. I think we'll wind that up with any other questions or comments. And again, you know, what has been your experience in migrating, replacing legacy systems, doing tools with users that are very well informed and sometimes opinionated?
The systems we work on, the data load transfer, that's kind of what you're doing. So similar to being in parallel, but it's a beta test. So every few weeks we have to grab a copy of the current legacy data store and copy it to the beta environment. And it's significant, so it's very, very large. And in fact, it was a significant engineering effort to make sure we could do repeated reloads of the data. So
yes.
Not your every 5 minutes, but every 2 or 3 weeks, and then not so much running in parallel, but more like intense beta testing, so that
yes.
it's familiar, but it was important for the users to see data in context. So we couldn't really let it age too much. because in their minds, it wasn't really, it didn't seem to work well. It needed it to be at most reach control. So, and
They would view it as a bug rather than as
Yeah.
incomplete data.
yeah.
Have you thought about open sourcing this to your Gemstone customers?
I suppose if there were demand, it could be put out as a goodie, sort of as a demo app.
Yeah.
But
Sounds like
there's a fair amount of it that is
tied to the old legacy maybe or something?
tied to the old legacy. And so, for example, if you go and look at a method category called Lisa, that's just kind of, how much is that appropriate? We've got a certain number of old set of bugs that, again, just has this long list of Lisa methods that, there's a certain number of things that are very specific, which,
might be instructive though.
Well, yeah, it might need a little bit more cleanup than you would want to invest in it before. But again, the argument for buy versus build. I've heard other people say, actually, okay, so one of my college roommates is a physician who's got me into computer programming, and he's written his own office practice system. And he said, it does everything I want, which is probably 20% of what it would need to be if it were commercially viable. And he says, nothing else could do what I'm doing. This is worth it for my practice efficiency. But to do the 80% that it would need to have to make it useful to other people, just would be a bit much. Yes, sir?
Let me ask you your experience. Was it worth it? What did you learn? Would you do it again? Are you happy with it?
I think the answer I would give now is, yes on that. While I was in the middle of it, there were times when, again, sort of the fact that we have a lot of cooks in the broth was a bit overwhelming at times. But the remarkable thing is that I think it's better because of the input and the demands and the insistence on, this needs to do this. But, it's up and running, and the background level of grumbling is essentially what it was with the old system of, it rarely, it's much easier to add features and to fix it. And, I came very close to upgrading it. Thursday we did the announcement or sent out the email saying 3103 has been released. And so I came in Friday morning saying, we've got to be on the latest. That was the commitment that we had, and I'm going to upgrade the system. And so I just, before I did, I just leaned over and said over the cue ball, Steve, to Steve, we're going to do this, right? We're going to stay on the latest. We're going to find the problems before our customers. And he said, not if you're leaving for a week. And, I said, but.
No argument.
You're probably right. And he said, when you get back, that's fine. That's fine. We should, we're not gonna get 10 years behind. But if you're leaving for a week, it can wait till you get back. So and after I thought about it for, And, I said, he says, well, I can't tell you no, go ask Norm. And I said, well, maybe I won't. He'd probably say, what does Steve think? And, so, okay? Yes?
You use Gen to develop it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my, let's end the slideshow. Yeah, a lot of my development, to work with, to work with the code, both Jade and, yes, primarily Jade, which is a Windows-based interface into Gemstone.
So James, does the new system still have the part of the web or the email part that would die? So there is an improvement here where it's more stable.
Right. So yeah, we did, rather than do an upgrade path, we did do a replacement. So we just started with a clean, empty 64-bit 3102 system and transferred the data. So did an export and an import. So we did not upgrade, migrate. So all the cruft, everything that is in the new system got transferred completely new. Yes. Other questions? It's the last talk of the day, so I don't want to keep you, but I'm not going anywhere. Happy to discuss things further. But thank you.